Welcome to Motion and Means, the podcast that connects the dots between transportation and opportunity. Every journey, every route, every mode of transport we rely on isn't just about movement, it's about access. Access to jobs, to education, to community, to a better quality of life. Here on Motion and Means, we explore how transportation acts as a vital enabler, a true economic equalizer that can shape our communities and our individual futures. We'll look at the innovations driving change, the policies that can create more equitable systems, and the human stories behind the infrastructure. So, let's get moving. This is Motion and Means. Okay, let's unpack this for you. In this deep dive, we're taking a close look at the week of August 1824, 2025. It's a period that's actually being called a tectonic adjustment in global transportation, which sounds pretty dramatic.
It really does, and we've gathered quite a bit of analysis on it.
Yeah, we're looking at everything from new trade policies shaking up supply chains to what's happening with different shipping modes, some doing well, some not so much.
Yeah.
Our mission today is really to help you cut through the noise, understand the most important shifts, and see how these, big global movements are directly impacting commerce, jobs, and, ultimately our everyday lives.
It's a fascinating mix, isn't it? You got this sort of tactical optimism in some areas, clashing with some pretty persistent strategic challenges underneath.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. One of the biggest immediate drivers of change, according to the material we've reviewed, is this impending suspension of the U.S. de minimis exemption.
Ah, yes, the de minimis.
It's effective August 29, 2025. Now, for those who maybe aren't familiar, what exactly is this exemption and why is suspending it such a, fundamental shift for low-value shipments?
Okay, so de minimis basically allowed low-value shipments, anything under $800, to come into the U.S. duty-free. And crucially, without needing all the formal customs paperwork. It was, a much simpler process.
Right, streamlined.
Exactly. And a lot of small businesses, especially in e-commerce, maybe drop shippers, they really relied on it. What's fascinating now is the ripple effect of suspending it. Think about it like this.
Okay.
Imagine you're a small online shop in, say, Germany, selling a $30 card game set.
Right.
Before that shipped to the U.S., no problem, no extra cost. Now, that same $30 item could suddenly face, an extra 20% tariff plus maybe 9% state tax.
Wow, that adds up fast on a low-cost item.
It does. It makes a lot of those low-priced products just non-viable, really, unless you mark them up significantly. So it directly hits consumer access, but also the whole business model for companies that depended on that cost effectiveness.
So not just a tweet. It's a big strategic shift, maybe trying to de-risk things for the U.S.
That's one way to look at it, certainly. But it definitely hits those small international businesses hard.
And the market reaction was immediate, wasn't it?
Oh, almost instantaneous.
We saw reports that postal services in Europe and India already announced they're temporarily suspending shipments to the U.S.
Yeah, because they said they just can't meet the new operational and technical requirements before that August 29 deadline.
That's a huge, immediate roadblock.
Precisely. And it raises a really important question, doesn't it? What does this mean for economic opportunity, particularly in, say, developing nations?
Good point.
Think about Indian exporters, maybe selling handicrafts, textiles.
Yeah.
They rely incredibly heavily on this low-value channel. Industry executives over there are apparently bracing for something like a 15 to 25% fall in U.S. shipment volumes.
Oof.
Yeah. For a small artisan, maybe a family business selling handmade goods directly to people in the U.S., that's not just a number. It's a massive disruption. It forces them to, either absorb costs they can't afford, raise prices maybe too high, or just fundamentally rethink their entire business.
So the long-term effect is pushing towards diversification.
It has to be. Diversifying sourcing, maybe setting up some kind of domestic fulfillment here or nearshoring, especially for those low-value, high-volume products. This single policy change really acts as a catalyst, a powerful one, for wider supply chain changes, decentralization.
That is a significant disruption. But playing devil's advocate here, could some argue this policy also creates an opportunity for domestic industries, even if it hurts small importers initially?
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely part of the conversation. Well, the immediate impact is a challenge for some international players. One perspective is that by leveling the playing field on duties and compliance, the policy could encourage U.S. businesses to source more domestically.
Right.
Or maybe from allied countries nearby, nearshoring.
So it's a trade-off.
It is. Increased friction for those foreign low-value imports could, potentially, stimulate domestic production and local job creation. So yeah, you could definitely see it as a strategic move aimed at maybe reshoring certain types of manufacturing or fulfillment.
And beyond de minimis, we're seeing, well, a whole barrage of new tariffs, too.
Yeah, it doesn't stop there.
The reports we're looking at mention a 50% tariff on certain Brazilian goods and semi-finished copper imports, and a new 50% Section 232 tariff on steel and aluminum derivative products. Plus, there's an update from the Department of Homeland Security to the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, the UFLPA.
Right, adding new sectors.
Yeah, 5 new sectors, including things like lithium and copper.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, these aren't just tariffs anymore. They're becoming direct legal challenges, and they seem to be fundamentally reshaping the global green energy supply chain. And electric vehicles, EVs.
Which relied heavily on China, right?
Hugely reliant on Chinese sourcing. So now an EV maker isn't just checking their immediate supplier. They have to trace battery components, like lithium, all the way back to the raw mineral extraction. Like, where was it mined?
Oh.
Otherwise, they risk having entire shipments detained under UFLPA.
That sounds like a massive compliance headache.
It introduces a whole new layer of legal and operational risk. It means companies have to invest significantly in transparency, in compliance systems. It's really redefining how companies ensure ethical sourcing through their entire value chain. It's a long-term shift towards de-risking and building more resilient supply networks.
So when we look at global supply chains overall, what does all this really mean?
Well, the combined effect seems to be widespread diversification. Pretty clear trend. Our analysis showed China's share of U.S. imports dropped to a decades-long low. It was just 13% in 2024.
13%, that's low.
It is. And this isn't just a temporary dip, it looks like. It feels like a strategic de-risking move by companies. They're actively relocating production. We're seeing moves to Mexico, Vietnam, India.
The usual suspects now for diversification.
Right. It signals a more long-term commitment to having diversified supply chains, not just a quick reaction. This is fundamentally reshaping global manufacturing hubs, for the next decade probably.
Yeah.
And that directly impacts where jobs and opportunities are created around the world.
Okay, diversification sounds good, on paper, spreading the risk. But does simply moving production to other countries truly address all the underlying vulnerabilities? Or does it just create new dependencies somewhere else?
That's a really crucial question. And the answer is probably a bit of both. Diversification definitely reduces reliance on, say, just one country. That's the goal.
Right.
But it doesn't automatically wipe out all vulnerabilities. You can certainly end up with new dependencies, maybe on specific raw material suppliers in the new region, or maybe on the political stability of that new manufacturing hub.
Good point.
So the goal is to distribute risk, yes. But real resilience also needs robust contingency planning and a deep understanding of the entire new supply ecosystem, not just where the final assembly happens.
So it requires a whole new level of strategic analysis for businesses.
Exactly.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the economy itself, because the reports we're seeing paint a really contradictory picture here, don't they?
They really do. It's quite confusing at first glance.
On one hand, you have some transportation executives seeing a strong market. Ports handling a rush of imports, a positive outlook. Maersk even noted peak season volumes driving demand. And U.S. GDP grew at a, pretty resilient 2.8% in Q2 2025. That sounds strong.
Yeah, suggests a solid macroeconomic base. Yet, other reports are starkly different. You mentioned Trinity Logistics. They saw import volumes drop sharply in July, and they're projecting a much lower second half of the year.
Okay.
And then there's the Cass Freight Index. That measures North American freight volumes across all modes, right? It's actually shown a decline for 30 consecutive months, still in what they call mild contraction territory.
30 months. So how do we square that circle? Strong GDP, busy ports, but falling freight index.
Well, the prevailing theory, and it makes a lot of sense, is this front-loading effect.
Ah, okay. Explain that.
Basically, importers saw these new tariffs coming, right?
Yeah.
De minimis suspension, other duties. Plus, there was potential for labor disruption at East and Gulf Coast ports.
Right, the contract negotiations.
Exactly. So what did? They accelerated their shipments. They pulled imports forward into the first half of 2025. That created that short-term surge we saw, the optimism at the ports.
Got it. Borrowing demand from the future, essentially.
Precisely. Pulled demand forward, which in turn means we're likely looking at a softer traditional peak season in Q3 and Q4. So it really boils down to that idea. Tactical optimism in the moment versus these persistent strategic challenges lurking underneath.
Okay, let's dive into how specific transportation modes are weathering these tectonic adjustments.
Yeah, let's look mode by mode.
First up, Ocean and maritime shipping. This seems like a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? Rates are apparently plummeting.
Oh yeah, falling fast.
Yet operational reliability, like ships being on time, is the best it's been in years.
It is. It's a classic market correction playing out. Capacity, basically the number of ships and containers available, has just run way ahead of demand.
Too many ships chasing too little cargo.
Pretty much. Trans-Pacific spot rates are dropping rapidly. Like Far East to the U.S. West Coast fell 8% just last week, down to around $3,100 for a standard container, a 40-foot equivalent unit, or FEU.
And that's down how much from the peak?
Over 50% down from its peak back in mid-June. Huge drop.
So for importers, this must feel pretty good.
Oh, for importers, it's described as an ideal environment. Low rates, steady rates, plenty of space on ships, things flowing smoothly.
But the carriers?
The carriers are definitely feeling the pain. Profitability is under significant pressure. We saw Zim, for instance, slashing its profit forecasts. So yeah, this healthy market for shippers is pretty painful for the ocean carriers who may be overinvested in capacity during that pandemic boom.
Okay, moving on to the ground. U.S. trucking. This sounds like it's showing some intriguing signs and maybe like it's nearing a tipping point.
Yeah, tipping point is a good way to put it. After a really prolonged slump, U.S. trucking is finally showing the first sort of tangible signs of a potential freight cycle shift.
What signs are those?
Well, spot rates, the prices for immediate truck hires, which have been falling for ages, are up slightly month over month. And significantly, for the first time in almost 2 years, they're actually up year over year.
Okay, that is interesting.
Reefer rates, too, that's for refrigerated trucks, they're also climbing seasonally, up for the third week straight. And this narrowing gap we're seeing between those spot rates and the contract rates companies lock in, that's a classic early signal of a market shift.
And what's driving it? Is it more freight suddenly appearing?
That's the crucial part, no. It seems to be driven almost entirely by a contraction in capacity, not a surge in demand.
So it's not more stuff being shipped, it's just fewer trucks available on the road.
Precisely. We looked at the FMCSA data, that's the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. Through June 2025, it shows the number of new trucking companies getting authority has fallen way off from the peaks we saw in 2021, 2022.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the number of carriers having their authority revoked, basically going out of business, that remains high, averaging like 5,000 to 6,000 per month.
Wow. So that capacity added during the pandemic boom is steadily leaving.
It's steadily exiting the market. And this contraction might even be accelerated by regulatory pressures and cost burdens. There was a really poignant example in the sources we reviewed. A California drayage operator, that's a small trucking company, moving containers short distances, usually from ports they had to close down. Why? Primarily because of the high costs associated with transitioning to electric trucks, which is mandated there.
So a well-intentioned environmental rule having a tough consequence.
Exactly. You know, this isn't just a business statistic. That closure represents a family's livelihood, maybe something built over decades, directly impacted by policy costs. It really shows how environmental policy, while crucial long-term, can have these immediate, sometimes really harsh ground-level impacts on small businesses and local jobs. And that, in turn, affects the overall market capacity.
That is a powerful example. And thinking about that, while those environmental goals are obviously vital, does that kind of policy risk creating an uneven playing field? Like for smaller operators who just can't absorb those big upfront costs for electric trucks as easily as, say, larger trucking companies?
It absolutely does. That's precisely the challenge that comes up again and again. Larger operators often have much better access to capital, maybe government incentives, economies of scale, all needed to transition to new technologies like electric trucks.
Right.
Smaller companies, independent owner-operators who are really the backbone of a lot of the drayage and short-haul sector, they face a much, much steeper barrier to entry and compliance.
So it could lead to consolidation?
It could easily lead to market consolidation and maybe less choice for shippers down the line. It demonstrates how policy, even with good intentions, can inadvertently end up favoring larger players while squeezing out the smaller ones. And that impacts competition and, potentially the overall efficiency of the system too.
Okay, let's look up to the skies now. Aviation and air cargo. Looks like some big geopolitical and corporate moves are shaping things there.
Yeah, definitely some significant developments. One big one is this zero-for-zero tariff agreement between the U.S. and the EU.
0 for 0.
Right. Starting in September, it eliminates tariffs on aircraft, jet engines, and some other aerospace parts going both ways.
Okay. That sounds like good news for the industry.
It provides really crucial strategic clarity, a stable environment. It should enhance margins for those big Tier 1 suppliers like Safran or Liebherr, and it helps ensure a more consistent pricing for the airlines buying the planes.
And there was something else benefiting airlines, too.
Yes, combined with a new U.S. law that permanently reinstates 100% bonus depreciation.
Which is?
Basically, a tax incentive allowing companies to deduct the full cost of big assets like aircraft immediately rather than over many years.
Got it.
So that applies to aircraft purchases made after January 19th, 2025. Put those two things together, the zero tariffs and the bonus depreciation. It creates probably one of the most financially favorable environments for aviation investment we've seen in quite a while. Should really foster innovation and growth in the sector.
And even with all the ongoing trade tensions, particularly with China, it looks like Boeing might be selling a huge number of jets over there.
Yeah, that story is fascinating. This potential deal, maybe up to 500 jets. It's being described as a potential centerpiece of a trade agreement. It really demonstrates just how globally interdependent things still are, despite all the political friction.
So China still needs Boeing, despite trying to build its own planes.
Well, China has a fundamental and very long-term need for Western aircraft. Their own domestic jet, the C919, is ramping up production very slowly. And Airbus, the other big player, simply can't meet all the market demand, especially for the bigger wide-body planes.
So China can't really sever its reliance on Boeing, politically charged or not.
It seems not, at least for the foreseeable future. It just validates how complex and interconnected the global aviation market is. Cooperation is almost necessary.
And air cargo, how's that looking?
Also seeing some positive signs. Air cargo demand from Asia-Pacific, specifically to the U.S., was reported up 5% year over year.
Okay, finally, let's talk about the backbone of resilience, perhaps. Rail and intermodal.
Ah, yes, rail and intermodal. Amidst all these other fluctuations, these sectors are actually showing pretty consistent growth.
Really? So they're bucking the trend.
To some extent, yeah. U.S. rail freight overall is running ahead of 2024 levels for the sixth consecutive week now, driven by things like ore, automotive parts, grain.
And intermodal, that's containers on trains, right?
Exactly. Intermodal container volumes are up a solid 8% year over year in the U.S.
And why is that growing when other areas are maybe softer?
It seems to be a direct consequence of importers shifting strategies. They're moving towards slower but more cost-efficient solutions like rail. It's an alternative to those urgent, much more expensive air freight or expedited truck shipments they might have used before.
So it's a shift towards more strategic, long-term shipping choices.
Precisely. It highlights how transportation choices can be used to optimize costs and support broader economic stability, especially when supply chains aren't in crisis mode anymore.
And are we seeing investment in this area too?
We are. Significant infrastructure investments. BNSF and CSX, two major railroads, announced new intermodal services. They're aiming for seamless coast-to-coast solutions, clearly capitalizing on that intermodal rebound.
Okay.
And on the passenger side, things are moving too. The California High-Speed Rail Project, well, it's making tangible progress. They just completed their 57th structure. A new grade separation opened up.
Slowly but surely.
Seems so. And Amtrak is finally starting to roll out its new next-gen Acela trains on the busy Northeast Corridor.
Right, the new faster trains.
Yeah. So these investments, both freight and passenger, are pretty crucial. For freight efficiency, yes, but also for enhancing personal mobility, connecting communities, fostering regional opportunities.
So wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you listening? This deep dive into just 1 week's transportation dynamics really paints a picture of a global market undergoing, well, that phrase again, tectonic adjustment. It feels like more than just incremental change.
Absolutely. We're seeing how these fragmented trade policies, these geopolitical risks, are forcing a fundamental re-architecture of supply chains. And that impacts pretty much everything, from the cost of goods on the shelf, to the basic viability of small businesses, to the actual routes goods take around the world.
And that distinction you made earlier seems key.
Yet the difference between that short-term tactical optimism, like the trucking spot rates ticking up, and the more persistent strategic challenges, like the fallout from de minimis. While we see some signs of rebound, maybe in trucking, definitely in domestic rail, the real operational financial impact of policies like the de minimis suspension, especially on small and medium-sized businesses, that's going to become much clearer in the coming weeks and months.
So businesses need to be adaptable.
Hugely adaptable.
Yeah.
The advice seems to be diversify your sourcing, invest in real-time data visibility, audit your supply chains for compliance, especially with things like UFLPA, and strategically reassess your transportation modes. It really calls for adaptable business models and quite a bit of strategic foresight.
And for you, the listener, this knowledge hopefully means understanding that, every package you order online, every product you buy, there's a whole story of global complexity and strategic navigation behind it. It's about recognizing this really intricate dance between policy, economics, logistics, and the human element too, like the drayage operator example, that shapes our world and influences the opportunities available within it.
And as we sit here and consider this constant flux, in global trade and all these forces reshaping how goods and people move, it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What new, maybe unforeseen ripple effects are going to emerge from today's tectonic adjustments? How might those redefine tomorrow's opportunities and tomorrow's challenges? The landscape of motion and means is definitely never truly settled.